It is Friday afternoon, so I appreciate you guys coming. It's our pleasure, actually, to have Dale Larson in town today. Dale is actually here for the NSBRI Industry Forum Council meeting, which took place yesterday. We launched a new funding program for small companies to address the health and wellness needs of astronauts in space flight, but also to take those technologies and see whether they have a leg for commercial products on Earth. And so Dale is one of the council members, and he, in fact, helped us make some decisions yesterday. So we took the opportunity to have him speak to you today about a new project that he's starting up, which we think is very exciting, both for the Texas Medical Center community and the clinicians around here, as well as the folks that we work with very closely down at Johnson Space Center who are interested in clinical decision support for astronauts who are going on a long-duration mission to Mars. So in introduction, I wanted to tell you that Dale is actually a mechanical engineer, at least by training. Used to be, right. And so, but he's been inducted into the biomedical engineer community because he's been doing so many years, many years worth of work in biomedical engineering, both in the commercial sector and the academic center. Settings. So he's been director of a variety of different programs. I'm not going to go into all the details, but currently he is director of biomedical engineering at the Draper lab in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so for those of you who don't know, Draper Lab is a phenomenal place. It's a lot of software engineers, a lot of other types of engineering going on. And more recently with Dale showing up, they're doing more biomedical stuff, and we're so lucky that they are, because I think they're going to be able to pull all the resources that they have at their disposal, working for contracts for DARPA and the intelligence community and NASA and all these other entities to the benefit of those of us who are trying to do work in the biomedical community. So today's going to tell you about decision support and some of the things that he's working on. So, oh yeah, you're good. Sorry.
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you, Dory. Thanks for inviting me. And I avoided a couple of cold days in Boston. We're unlike you guys who seem to have transitioned into what we call summer. You probably still, we're still very much in early spring, and it's still cold in Boston. Want to caveat this a little bit. This is an early stage. This is early days for our project with this. There's more plans than data in this presentation, but feel free to ask me questions and go at it. The people, Dan Trevilian and Lauren Kessler, helped me put the presentation together. The last slide has a full listing of who's on our team, and we've actually got quite a powerful team of intensive care doctors and computer scientists and software engineers, a couple of mathematicians thrown in to make this happen. So IMEDs is an integrated, you can read the title. It's just one quick slide to get you oriented as to what we're doing. We're focusing on the ICU first, and our plan is to create the system here in the center is our IMEDs platform, and it forms three basic functions. The first function is we aggregate the data from a variety of data sources. Omics is something of the future. Omics is coming in the future. EMRs are largely here today, and medical devices currently aren't integrated in any fashion that we've really seen. The closest we've seen to integrating medical devices is Philips has a research database product that they sell along with their monitors. And so what we do is we take these data in, and they come in, they have different time scales, different update frequencies, different units, and we massage the data to put it on a common footing. Then once it's on a common footing, we put it in a clinical database. From the clinical database, the data is pulled to drive a decision support engine, and the output of the decision support engine are displays. Obviously, there's a local display, which we envision being something fairly large, a touch screen that would sit at the bedside, maybe an equivalent version at the nurse's station. And then a remote display is an acknowledgement that iPads and tablets and smartphones are here to stay and then they have a role. We have a strong belief when we talk about decision support, we emphasize the word support. We're not trying to put doctors out of business. We're not trying to automate being a doctor. We're trying to give the doctors enhanced situation awareness and then tools to allow them to make better decisions faster. So basically focus on what they're already good at as opposed. So part of the motivation for this is at a business level, we decided that if not the biggest issue in healthcare today, one of the top three is cost, and something has to be done. And we would prefer that it not be done with a hatchet, but that it be done with a scalpel, based on information and knowledge. So that's where this comes into. We think better decisions will result in lower cost healthcare. Now, there's a number of things you can do to reduce costs. There's a variety of things that politicians do, and if we surveyed this room, we could double the length of this list without too much trouble. But the point is, Draper's not political, so I can't do anything about what they do. There's a number of business practice solutions that partially or whole address cost. Once again, I'm not Deloitte & Touche. I'm not a business consultant. What Draper does is we develop new technologies. So my business at large, we're focusing on information systems and new diagnostics to enable evidence-based medicine on the concept that evidence-based medicine has the potential to dramatically cut healthcare costs. And we also believe that pushing healthcare into lower cost settings is an important issue. And this is something where we're in strong agreement with NSBRI on, and we think NASA has a role to play in this, both solving your problems in flight, but also porting your solutions to land, to terrestrial applications, because you're not going to fly an intensivist. You're not going to fly a surgeon. Or if you do, Murphy would tell you that the surgeon will be the one that needs the care. Murphy's the most powerful man on the planet, by the way. That's my experience. So our goals for IMEDs are we want to do a better job of leveraging support staff. We want to deliver care in lower cost settings. So if currently it's done in an ICU, we'd like to improve ICU care so that people get discharged from the ICU down to a normal medical surgical ward. There's any number of situations where there's duplicative efforts. We were talking, I believe it was at lunch yesterday, about if you show up at, if you have a CT scan done and then you go to a new doctor, he's going to want to do a new CT scan because our CT scan is not the same as their CT scanner, and heaven forbid we should share the data. So we want to reduce duplicative efforts, and then reducing medical errors. And we think the dominant thing here is not new sensors, it's not new devices, it's making better use of what we already have. I've had a number of doctors tell me over the last 18 months, please don't give me a new sensor. Just got more than enough data, I don't know what to do with what I already have. Help me make sense out of what I have. So, and then further, making the point, in the hospital, 52% of cost is labor. And it's a little bit troubling when you look at this because you say here you've got about 1.5 million people doing direct patient care and 3 million people supporting them. Now I know some of these are lab techs and pharmacy techs and pharmacists that probably don't, that don't fall into the direct care. So it's not really a 2-to-1 ratio, but it's still a pretty high ratio. And if you're trying to cut costs, labor is a great place to start because, was it John Dillinger, the bank robber? Why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. So we started in the ICU. We started there for 2 reasons. One, it's a very complicated place. From a data perspective, it's a mess. So here the picture's cropped a little bit, but you can see an electronic health record that's open, a couple of IV pumps. There's some kind of screen over here. My eyes aren't good enough to tell what it is. This is probably the cardiac monitor. Here's another monitor, another screen to look at. And look here. Everybody's favorite thing that was supposed to be eliminated in the PC age, paper, right? So it's a mess. And if you think the data's a mess, yes, exactly. Oh my God. This is what they're living with. So what you have here in the ICU is a situation where the patients are all on the edge. If they weren't on the edge, they'd be in a lower intensity ward. So the patients are very sick, they're very fragile, and it's a mess. So what this mess does is it leads to errors. And it's also expensive. So I was shocked. Now, it depends on whose data you want to look at. Some people say 80% of the cost of healthcare occurs in the last year of life. There's other data that will, if you cut it another way, you can show that 80% of healthcare costs accrue in the ICU. They're both right. The ICU is a very expensive place, and it's where a lot of old people go. So they're overlapping. So the dominant reason from our perspective is that there's too much data and not enough information. So the data aren't integrated. So you look around the bedside and you see all these monitors. It's up to the doctors and the nurses to integrate that data. Now, they can do it. They do a good job, but it's one more task they have to do. And frankly, it's a task that technology can take care of for them. So our hope with IMEDs is to do the integration, do some of the analysis for them so that they can focus on what does the analysis mean and what do I do next? How do I treat this patient? So there's no real processing of data available. We do know that they will take data and they'll go sit down in a quiet place and analyze it. We want to do that in real time for them. I mean, these patients are sick. They can't afford to, if it takes you 4 hours to do the analysis and you come back and the patient's dead, which is possible in the ICU, that's a problem. And heaven forbid you should be able to search back data. Is this the first time this patient's had this set of conditions? Is there something else going on? So we think a properly designed decision support platform can do all these things for you. This is how the engineer in me, I can't make heads or tails out of that. I'll be honest with you. To the doctors, this sings to them. They get it. Now, the problem is what happens on August 9th? Does he have to recopy everything? And this doesn't promote collaboration. This doesn't help nurses. This doesn't help physical therapists. This doesn't help respiratory therapists. This only helps the doctor. Dorit has this frightened look on it. That's the same look I had when I first saw it. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So this is something this is how the doctors integrate the data today. And they know what it all means, and good for them, but they spend energy. They spend cognitive energy doing that. And we think their cognitive energy is better spent deciding what do these data mean and what do I do about them. So the aviation industry figured this out, and systems engineering approach was able to reduce crashes by about 65%. That's pretty impressive. So, and this now you're starting to get more into Draper's home turf. You're from the Aero and Astro department. This is Draper's home turf. We came out of the Aero Astro department at MIT, Doc Draper. So I'm told this is what happened. This is the cockpit before the glass cockpit. It looks complicated, but I'm told there's a lot of logic to it, and that it worked pretty well, but that this works so much better. And this has improved the pilot's ability to know what's going on. If John F. Kennedy John F. Kennedy Jr. had one of these, he'd probably still be alive today. I'm told he came out of a cloud bank upside down, and when he tried to pull up, he pulled down, and the rest is history. So we're looking to bring this kind of idea ported into the medicine. I have to say ported because you don't just, medicine has its own set of quirks and its own set of requirements, and it's not like flying a plane. It's actually way more complicated. The physics of planes are very well understood. The physics of the body is still largely a mystery. So in the same vein, in the old days, you had maps and you had instructions, and you could stop at the gas station and ask your wife to go get directions. Then GPS came. Now, this is the raw output from a GPS. As a user, it's useless. But when you pair it with some software, you can say, okay, context, situation awareness, here's where I am, here's where I need to go, here's what's around me. So we're looking to bring some version of GPS and glass cockpit into medicine. So here's our architecture. You've seen it before. First thing we do is pull all the data in, synchronize it and align it, condition it, put it into a patient state database, which is, by the way, backwards searchable. And then we have data available for analysis. And then we have a decision support engine that I think of as a logical place for an app store. So there are, I'm guessing, you know, when this is all said and done, if we're successful and we get this architecture rolled out into a system and make it available, there will be thousands of different apps running in here. And it's also very important that the data be displayed in a way that makes sense. You know, if we go back and display it, come on, if we display it this way, shame on us. We need to come up with the medical version of this. Come on. So, and then the last thing that I want to talk about is this has to be networked. I'll get to that a little bit later, but we think that that can promote telemedicine. It can promote ICU, having ICUs in remote places. As actually we were at Hopkins with Marek Mirsky, and he was talking about telemedicine, and I guess, you know, so rural Maryland is pretty rural, and he held up his iPhone and said, they send me pictures of their monitor. They hold it up to their cardiac monitor and they send me a picture. That's how Johns Hopkins communicates telemedicine-wise with rural Maryland. What? Yes, they are, and it's just not a good situation. So what we think is going to happen is when we're reasonably convinced that even if we don't succeed in getting this architecture deployed, something very much like it is going to happen. And I've talked with the doctors on our team, and they believe that's the case. We've had some discussions with some medical device companies, and they're looking at things very much like this. And what will happen, if it goes right, is we will unleash the innovative talents of the whole world deploying, creating clinical decision support applications. So I just want to run through a quick, this is one case study that Stefan Meyer at Columbia University put together for us. And I'm going to do something I've never actually done in a presentation. I'm actually going to read something, because this is what he wrote in an email one night. A 70-year-old man is admitted to an ICU for worsening renal failure. A few days later, he develops a relatively minor amount of tachycardia with reduced heart rate variability, fever, tachypnea, hypotension, and leukocytosis. All of these are minor and unremarkable in their own right, but the IMED system correctly identifies this constellation of changes as representing a pre-septic state. Antibiotics are started and the patient is back to normal within 24 hours. In the current system, the syndrome of severe sepsis would not have been recognized until 36 hours later, when the patient abruptly develops high fever, severe hypotension, and a change in mental status. In addition to the antibiotics, he is intubated and started on pressors. His renal failure worsens and may even become permanent, and he faces a 40% mortality risk. And all of this can be prevented with a better early warning system. So there you go. With IMEDs, the patient's back to healthy in 24 hours. Without IMEDs, 36 hours before you start really doing anything, and the patient has not a good outcome. And there's several other scenarios that are along these lines. I was telling you guys upstairs, when we started this project, we went out to Cleveland and met with Dr. Michael DeGiorgia from Case Western University Hospital. And he started presenting slides, and they were our slides. And so we were like nodding, you know, just total agreement. We put our slides up, and we realized we were trying to do the same thing. He hooked us up with Claude Hemphill at UCSF and Tim Buckman at Emory, and we all had the basic same thing. And so we have tremendous clinical concurrence that this is a good thing to do in the ICU. And these kinds of stories, you know, that's pretty compelling that you, and I don't know how much you guys know about sepsis, but it's really deadly. And every 30 minutes you go without treating them with the right antibiotics, the mortality rate goes up by 5%. So early warning system, improved context, situation awareness could really make a difference here. So this is, don't take this to the bank, don't throw things at it. This is something we put in a grant recently as a way of thinking about how to visualize data. So I don't know if, are you guys familiar with spider charts? It's sort of okay, everybody, there's enough nodding of heads that I'm going to assume you do. So what we're proposing to do here is start off and normalize healthy results would result in a perfect circle of a spider chart. So from across the room, a doctor can look at this and go, healthy, pretty healthy, sick but not too bad, still not too bad, whoops, going off the cliff. And so if you start to do this with time on the axis, you can start to get a sense of where the patient's going. And so these are the kinds of things we're exploring. We have a human-centered engineering group. And actually, you guys have been funding Kevin Duda, who's in that group. They spend a lot of time thinking about how do people think? What are their biases? How do they think? How do I display information so that they get it with the least amount of cognitive effort? And so this is something we put in a proposal to Tatrick 2 weeks ago. So why do we think we can do this? So part of the reason we think we can do this is we've done things very similar in other industries. We've been working for years in the intelligence community. You can see this is their data center, and it looks pretty complicated. We've done some recent work for the military. This is a device that's used by soldiers in the field to call in close air support so that they actually get the bad guys, not the good guys. And then in space, we have something I think several of you are familiar with, something called Timeliner, which is running on, I guess it's running on space station to control experiments. We have another technology, high-speed data acquisition from multiple sources that we've been doing for Homeland Security. And then we have a new piece of software that we've invented that allows us to dramatically simplify the writing of drivers. So what we're proposing for IMEDs is not a direct port of any of those, but it's kind of like you throw them all into the stew, stir it up, and out comes what IMEDs needs. We've also got something very similar running in power plants. So tell me if this sounds familiar. There are devices from GE that are doing things and measuring things. There are devices from Siemens that are doing things and measuring things. There are maintenance databases. And right now, in most power plants, there's a little old guy with a clipboard wandering around with banging on the turbine to see does it sound right. And so we've found that we can use our technology to do an IMEDs-like system for power plants, and we're installing them. Progress Energy loves us. We have another, this is a Timeliner-based application. Several years ago, a broadband company licensed it from us. And you know how, like, typically the cable guy shows up and he goes, oh, I'll be back tomorrow. I need a whatever, fill in the blank. So what happens now, or he gets there and he finds out that your cable's not working because you didn't pay your bill. So what the guys did with our Timeliner software is they queried all the cable hardware, the lines, the modems, the devices at the end of the modems. They queried them all. They queried the service database. They queried the financial database. They queried everything that was available to them so that they could plan their service calls. And what they found is that they indeed had better customer service at lower cost. So their profits went up and their customers were happier. That's what everybody wants. Now, in a nice turn of events, the two guys that left Draper with this license to go do this are now both back. So, and they're both on the IMEDs team. It's really great. So this is the next to last slide. The initial vision is exactly what I stated earlier. We want to leverage support staff more effectively, deliver care in lower cost settings, reduce duplication, and cut errors. And that, I think if we do that, we'll have done a great service to the country. But when I really fog up my glasses and think long term, this is what I want to see happen. I want to create what I call a learning healthcare system, and I think we can do it with IMEDs. Effectively running a real-time, continuous, autonomous, networked clinical trial. What typically happens in medicine is any given day a new drug gets approved. So let's say you get a drug approved for early stage breast cancer, and it has a patient cohort, enrollment criteria. Guarantee you the day after it gets approved, a woman shows up with breast cancer who is outside of the protocol. What do? Well, doctors are smart people. They use their judgment, and they do what they think is best. And today, what has to happen is somebody needs to start a new clinical trial to expand the rate. It typically doesn't happen because it's probably not worth it, and she's not that far out of the criteria, so let's just leave her. Let's just do it. But what I can envision happening in the future is by running this practical clinical trial, that woman becomes patient number one in the expanded enrollment criteria. And if you're running this nationwide, you can achieve significant clinical patient enrollment numbers, and you can start to drive healthcare so that we're having to use our judgment less and having more facts at our disposal. So that's where I'd like to see it go. There are regulatory issues with this. I don't even attempt to address them right now. Frankly, right now we're focused on this initial vision. So the team, I think I told you my vice president was on Capitol Hill last week. So you can see we've got several states represented, a couple of them that are swing states. Never hurts. It also happens that there's some really good clinicians in these settings. So anyway, I'll open it up to questions now.
How's it going to work? How do we do this study with all these people?
Well, the development plan is to work very closely, write the software. So get the platform put in place. And that has to be done very closely with the doctors. I have a rule at Draper. I never let a project get very far until we get a doctor who's willing to join our team. Because if you can't find a doctor willing to join the team, you're probably not solving the right problem, or your idea is stupid, both of which engineers are perfectly capable of. I'm one, so I can say that. I'm in the fraternity, I can say that. So we're going to write the software, start writing the software. Our plan is to build a mock ICU at 2 of our collaborator sites. If I had to guess, I'd say one will be at Draper and one will be in Cleveland at the Case Western University Hospital. And what we'll do there is that those mock-ups will give us a place to roll out the software, pilot it so that nobody gets hurt, no patients involved. It'll be canned data or engineers hooked up to vital signs monitors kind of thing. And the doctors will come in and give us feedback while we're developing, so it'll be an iterative process. Then once we get it to a point where we're reasonably comfortable with it, we'll roll it out into one clinical site and do a clinical study. And that clinical study is, we're going to find out, there's a famous military saying, no strategy survives first contact with the enemy. So we anticipate iteration on a constant basis as we go out through the first clinical study. Once that stabilizes somewhat, we'll roll it out to several sites. And then when we've rolled it out to several sites, we want to do outcome studies and prove that this thing really does what we say it does. And then, a combination of having the team members, so we've hit some influential people in critical care medicine. So there's some influential people, and they're geographically spread, and if they become early adopters of IMEDs, then more peer-reviewed literature will start to amass, and hopefully that at some point we achieve viral status and it goes broadly. I will say Draper's a nonprofit entity. Everybody on our team is nonprofit, so we don't have proprietary issues. We don't have greed issues. This is, just a community of people that want to solve the problem. Yes?
I have questions and some comments. I'm a neurointensivist as well.
Okay.
Just two of my colleagues here are also neurointensivists. And, one question that I have for you, or at least one comment, it's great, we can integrate all this data, but I think there's also a huge educational piece, to the caregivers, because, as you know, we have a lot of beepers and a lot of alarms that go from the ICU, so people get fatigued, and that's very common. So you can hear the alarm, oh, okay, it's the same alarm from bed 2, so I'm not going to pay attention to it. So there's a potential for this thing also to go into the same mode, this behavioral issue of not responding to the alarm or to the message that is in the computer. I'm just going to ignore this message, click, go next. And so there's one issue that I'm sure you probably thought about.
Right, well, we have, where's California? Dr. Vespa and Martin from UCLA are working on what they call smart alarms.
Yes,
so
yes. That's one issue. The other issue, obviously, you also said that this will cut costs, but the same thing happened when EMRs were introduced.
Yep.
And so far, I don't think anybody has been able to prove that we're actually saving money by having the EMRs. The hospitals have invested a huge amount of dollars, but at the back end, nobody has actually seen or proven for sure that we're actually saving money yet.
Right.
So I think your idea of doing the outcome study, it's a good idea. Now, I don't know whether any of these guys have told you, but we do have a neurocritical care research network that has 169 sites throughout the world. And we are the primary site here at Baylor. And so that's a much bigger opportunity for you to test out your thing rather than having just only this. We have sites in Canada, Australia, Hong Kong, South America, European Union, so 169. So
okay. Well, I'd like to learn more about that.
A much broader view of just that having all these sites. Now, I know all these guys, but the other question that I want to ask you, comment, are you available in the week of May 18th through the 20th?
Probably.
The reason why I'm asking you this question is because we have an NIH-funded research conference here, the second Neurocritical Care Research Conference, and the topic of the conference is multimodality neuromonitoring. And some of these guys are coming. I just didn't know that you were there doing some of this work. So obviously, when I got the email, we became interested in coming and see what you had to say. But we're going to bring people also from the European Union, South America, Canada, the US to talk about all these modalities and how we're going to integrate all these modalities into what we do every day. Well, I can't personally commit
because I don't know what my calendar looks like, but I can commit that somebody from Draper will come. How's that?
Okay, well, we'll be in contact after.
Yes.
Dr. Rao. And Rao. Yeah.
They work with John Clark, they work with Jeff Sutton.
Okay.
So then they're familiar with some of the issues that NASA's having, the intracranial pressure, they've done some work in that area. So Dale is actually connected to us through the NSBRI Industry Forum. And so he's helping us with commercial opportunities for some of the technology. So this is a great connection. Thank you for that.
Yeah, we should trade business cards before.
I had a question. I guess it's related to the maturity of the technology. Did you mention this was a proof of concept, or is this operational?
Right now, these are ideas. The power plant is working. The intelligence community, the other industry examples are working. So the technology, in its raw form or its base form, is fairly mature. Applied to medicine, it's still an idea.
Okay. Can you go back to your architecture picture?
Sure.
Question about it. So, yeah, a lot of those sort of proposed architectures, I'm sure you talked to our folks. This is similar to kind of what we're targeting for an exploration demonstration effort. Your integration piece, what you've deployed today in the industrial setting, is that based on proprietary built integration technology, or is that commercial off the shelf, like a DDS or a?
It's mostly based on a timeliner, but modified with some of those, the Homeland Security software.
Okay.
And,
So yeah, I guess we're looking at middleware as well. And so
Yeah.
I didn't know if you were
well,
deploying.
I think where the action is.
Okay. Okay. And my other question, you had an EMR, I think, on our picture. Again, it's all proposal, it sounds
Yeah.
like. Is this work related to the Mimic 2 work at Harvard?
No.
The okay, you familiar with that work?
Not really.
No collaboration there? Okay. Okay, thank you.
So another quick question to follow up on what Byron said. I think before we had asked the question about your schedule, you showed a near-term vision and a long-term vision. Do you have kind of a layout of what your near-term vision schedule looks like?
Well, we're raising money right now, so
Okay.
that's one of those unschedulable things that it happens when it happens. So no, I don't have a schedule. We know the sequence, but when it starts, when it ramps up is basically when we raise money.
So that Sepsis 2 example you had,
Mm-hmm.
was that using a prototype of the system or?
No, that was Dr. Meyer saying this is where IMEDs will take us.
Oh, I see. Okay. So that, being able to prove that is part
Right.
of the outcome.
Right.
before part-
Now, we are starting a project with Dr. Meyer on our own money to integrate the sepsis example and display and cerebral autoregulation. So we're going to create a little mock-up ICU for him to capture the data. Our human-centered engineers are going to work with him to figure out how to display the data, and then he has a man named Michael Schmidt that works with him, and our mathematicians are going to work with Michael to develop algorithms to do that. We also have a similar project we're launching with Frank Giacono at the VA in Cleveland to look at the interactions between heart rate variability and respiratory variability.
Imagine in an ideal world, the vendors would all be one, and every one of those systems would have one vendor, one name tag on it, GE, whatever, and they would all be capable to be wireless or something. But that is not the case. So imagine a lot of this upfront work is going to be collaborating, trying, and even in your little ICU to make them communicate to your software.
Right.
Have you made any collaborations or reach out to partnerships to be able to address that early?
We've spoken with one of the leading monitor companies, but we've purposely kept our team nonprofit because things get real cloudy real quick when the profit motive kicks in. I mean, it's bad enough in academia with, because of Bayh-Dole, things get goofy sometimes, but we have a chance at it. But that's one of our next steps is to branch out into the...
Is there data known as to what systems are most prevalent out there? I mean, is there a type of a survey you could do or some type of thing hospitals know and they could say, this is the type of instrumentation we currently use the most of, so you could start to integrate the ones more widely used versus the ones that are, coming up with the newest thing or
yeah,
something like that?
We've got half a dozen, 8 or 9 ICU hospitals hooked up, so when we start to roll it out, we will prioritize. And I imagine what'll happen is if we start to succeed, we'll succeed faster. It'll be the classic hockey stick, a little bit of progress, and then you reach some critical mass, and then everybody gets afraid that the train's going to leave the station without them, and they jump on.
One last comment, it's a personal comment. My father, he's a mechanical engineer up in Chicago. His wife passed away this past October. And the big thing, he says, Linda, you're a chemist, you just got your MBA. I want you to be able to design something that can help doctors communicate. Because he said they kept coming in and nobody was communicating, nobody knew what was going on. He literally was writing notes like that. This is my dad, the engineer, telling the doctors what the previous doctor said.
Right.
So thank you.
Well, we have, when we started this, we started at Children's Hospital in Boston in the NICU. And it's particularly troubling there because the babies can't talk to you. I mean, frankly, in a lot of the ICUs, the patients can't talk to you. And the parents want to know what's going on. So our vision of, when we get this touch screen display is there'll be a parents page, a main page, a nurses page, a respiratory therapist page, and a lot of the information will be common. But if you get, if you're the attending otolaryngologist and you get called at 3 in the morning to called to the NICU at 3 in the morning, you got to come up to speed fast, and it's not like you're the attending and you've been seeing this patient. So that's one of the things we're going to promote. And I've watched rounds in the hospital, and you see eight people standing around, and you're like, well, why aren't you starting? Well, she's not here yet, or he's not here yet, because communication is a problem in the hospital, and everybody's busy. Everybody's got a beeper that boat anchor that ties them to things. So it is your father's right.
Yeah, he's a great one.
It is a problem. Yeah.
Your approach to decision support, you mentioned the algorithms. Are you planning to work with your collaborators to develop the logic to be able to develop these decision support?
Yes. Yeah, but not just the collaborative. What our real vision for this is to get this platform in place, make the interfaces understood, and then let it roll. Whoever's got a good idea can try it. Just like if you go to the App Store for the iPhone or your iPad, and it can be overwhelming. But still, there's Draper by no means has a lock on all the good ideas. So our goal is to solve this problem, and the more people we can engage in the process, the better.
It sounds like the first phase would really be getting the framework and the
Yes,
connectivity,
definitely.
the device integration in place, and at that point, you'd probably look at building the decision intelligence on top of that integration.
Right. Yeah. Now I'm starting, because the decision support can take time.
Right.
I'm kind of starting a parallel track so that I have a few things to deploy. So when the platform gets there, we can say, here's application number 1.
Sure.
Here's application number 2, to seed and water the lawn.
Gotcha.
And then
Take it from there. Thanks.
Is your goal in long term to have a tool that can integrate with different interfaces of the EMR, or to replace the EMR with this product?
no, we want to integrate with different EMRs. Now how this actually gets commercialized. I mean, because at the end of the day, somebody's going to have to commercialize it. It could go the way of like the Apache software or Firefox. That's a little harder to conceive of how you would pull that off in medicine, because the FDA wants a lot more control, revision controls on things. But at some point, I can envision either some kind of a consortium gets formed that controls the interfaces, or I could see that the kernel that we develop gets non-exclusively licensed, and GE, Siemens, Philips, Cerner plug it in, envelop it in their system and go forward with it. And I'm not smart enough to know exactly how that's going to take shape.
We've actually been looking at the space for a while, the middleware space, and there's actually quite a few companies in the market today and it's a Continuo Alliance. They're an organization that's attempting to develop the standards that I think you're talking about. Interface standards to your Philips monitor, your blood pressure monitor. And so Continuo is out there. So what's happening is a lot of the vendors are building to that Continuo standard. And it's basically a repackaging of the 1073 standard. So the standards exist. And what you'll find are, again, vendors are starting to adopt those. We just went to the HIMSS conference, and there were quite a few vendors there that were marketing their integration. You got the capsule. I see you got the capsule and the Nuvon,
Yeah.
Sirona.
And
Yeah,
you
so
can't read it here because it's kind of, we picked the wrong font color, but this is the Medical Device Plug and Play initiative that Julian Goldman's leading.
Right.
So there's a lot of people. Now, I think the thing that's much better. The thing to take away from this is, as near as we can tell, we're the only people going end to end. There's a lot of people doing things, and if Dick Moberg succeeds, or any of these people succeed, great. That just means we have to spend less energy on that part of it. And we're trying to do this, and I don't think I emphasized that enough, but we're trying to do this in an open platform. Not open source, because medicine gets complicated with open source, but open platform. We're not trying to circle the wagons and keep people out. We're trying to put something in place and draw people in.
Do you foresee a minimum number of inputs the system would require to give you a useful output, or to be scalable from, a couple different sensors up until, however many you would need in an ICU?
I would think at minimum you need the key vital signs. Without the key vital signs, you can just go to the, between the laboratory database and the electronic medical record. So if we don't at least get the vital signs, there's not enough differentiation between us and an electronic health record. And then eventually, the more the merrier,
Okay, I just think about the system we're trying to design, and it's a very small number of devices initially. And, whether a system like this would actually be able to support such a small number.
Oh yeah. In fact, you could be on our growth path.
I'm assuming you target your patient condition. So if you're looking at your outcome studies, you'd be targeting something.
We're recording it.
Oh, okay. I would assume when you get to the point where you're looking at outcomes and how successful and how useful the tool is, being able to prove that, you'd probably target a specific set of treatments or patient conditions, which would drive which devices you'd need to treat that condition. And so I'm assuming you'd be defining all those things. We're doing something similar, where we're looking at potential conditions for a mission, what crew members would experience, and that's what's driving our demonstration effort.
Right.
So, I mean, we're not looking at chronically ill patients here, but we're looking at...
Your patients are pretty healthy.
They're pretty healthy, but they do get burns.
They better be.
Right. They get burns and things like that. So when Dave mentions the small number of devices, we're really limited in what we can demonstrate, but we want to try to tie that to some patient outcome, which would be one of the conditions that we've defined. And so if it's scalable to support lots of conditions, then those are the architectures that we're looking for.
Right.
Things that we can maybe start small with and grow to handling more sinister conditions.
All right.